What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thursday, May 16th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. And we have 5 MLB games tonight. No real weather concerns, it looks like, so we don't have to worry about that. 5-game slates are always interesting to talk about. Obviously, ownership becomes a bigger factor, negatively correlating with the field in a sport like baseball that has so much variance, so much randomness, becomes more important. So a lot of times you end up playing lineups that don't feel great. Maybe you're getting teams you don't want to get to, but it can be pretty fun just to factor in more of the game theory element. Gives us a lot to talk about. So we'll get into all of that throughout the show, going game by game as always. One other thing at the top that I wanted to mention, I've mentioned several times now the new site that I'm working on with Brick75, Nerdy Tenor, and Uticow called Endgame Syndicate. If you are interested in that, you can click the link in the description below, put your name on the email list on that landing page to be notified when the site goes live. But also, we are working to get together our first set of videos so that we are ready to go live. And if anyone has any suggestions, anything they want from me specifically as far as video content, video series, whether it is process related, overall strategy related, whatever it may be, if there's anything that you've wanted to pick my brain about, comment on the video below, DM me on Twitter, tweet at me. It doesn't really matter. Just give me those ideas. If there's anything specifically that you are interested in, happy to read through those and see if there's anything that I think will make good content. But we are getting started on that. So again, click that link in the description below. Get your name on the email list for alerts for that. Now diving into the Mets and Phillies in Philadelphia, good hitters park, questionable pitching on the mound. Taijuan Walker facing off against Jose Quintana. Neither of these pitchers are great. Quintana is generally pretty good at limiting power, but he doesn't miss a lot of bats, which is always concerning when you have a pitcher going from making his home starts in Citi Field in New York, a favorable pitcher's park, to pitching in Citizens Bank, which is the opposite of a favorable pitcher's park. So you do have him at 5,100, which is just too cheap of a price tag. I've said it a million times over the years. If you have a fully stretched out major league level starting pitcher and they're priced around $5,000, they are by definition underpriced. So I do think he's going a little bit under-owned here with 6% projected ownership. He showed up in about 13% of the lineups that I built. So not a priority, not a high probability play, but just given the value, he does have merit on this slate, the value and the fact that it's a 5-game slate. But you're not getting much in the way of strikeouts from Quintana. He's not somebody that I really want to be getting to. Only a 15% K percentage this year, 4.56 xFIP. He has been giving up home runs so far this season as well, 1.3 home runs per 9. His expected ISO to righties is 177. His expected ISO to lefties, 227. If you go back to the start of last season, 144 expected ISO to righties. So again, typically someone that does a decent job of limiting power, but he is going to pitch to contact in a park where that is a pretty scary proposition. On the other side, Taijuan Walker, not that much more expensive at 6,300. He is projected to be the more popular of the two pitchers in this game, and he probably should be. 19.5% strikeout percentage this year, 4.8 xFIP. So again, it's not that he's been that much better than Quintana, but he is favored. The Phillies are favored. He does historically have better strikeout stuff than Quintana does. So if you're going to one of these guys, I do think that Walker shows up first, but I just don't think that the gap between the two of them is as big as the ownership suggests that it should be. Since the start of last season, 157 expected ISO to righties for Walker, 178 to lefties. Again, not a lights out pitcher either, not a great strikeout pitcher. So two relatively weak pitching options here, but they are inexpensive. So they do offer you some value. Offensively, I have no issue really wanting to get to either of these teams. From a stacking standpoint, they're both showing up in the middle of the pack as far as all stack types go. When you look at 5-man specifically, the Mets actually show up a little bit ahead of the Phillies, but they are pretty similar again in the middle of the pack. I do like the Mets from a tournament standpoint. Like, I think that the Phillies are the team that I would want to get to first. When you look at the individual hitters here, you can see that there's more of them showing up than Mets hitters. But the fact that Taijuan Walker is projected for about 20% ownership does drive the Mets up a little bit for me from a tournament standpoint. just because you are getting that negative correlation with the field. That does become even more interesting on a 5-game slate. You do get the park upgrade for them. And it's not like they have bad hitters in their lineup. Francisco Lindor at 4,500 on a 5-gamer is going to look pretty good. Brett Beatty is really cheap, may or may not ever figure out how to hit, but he is really cheap. Pete Alonso, we know, has a ton of power. He's less than 5K. JD Martinez is cheap. It's not a bad offense. And again, they are getting that park upgrade. Brandon Nimmo at 4,400 gives you power from the left side. So when you factor in ownership and or pitching ownership specifically, the Mets look a little bit more appealing to me than they do just when you're building lineups. The Phillies, of course, are the more likely team to succeed. You have a bunch of right-handed power in this lineup against a guy in Quintana that doesn't miss a lot of bats. But also one thing that is really important to point out, not only are Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper really good at hitting left-handed pitching, but Quintana's not good at getting lefties out. This isn't somebody that dominates same-handed hitters. Even if you go back to the start of last season when his numbers overall are better than they are so far this season, he's still allowed a 248 expected ISO, a 351 expected WOBA to lefties since the start of last season. So again, it's still a small sample there. You know, if you go back to 2022 to get a little bit bigger sample, it drops to a 148 expected ISO to lefties. But the point being here, you shouldn't be skipping Bryce Harper. You shouldn't be skipping Kyle Schwarber. And you can play these guys individually as well. Schwarber projected for about 11% ownership. Harper projected around 15. So it's not like the field is expected to skip over them either, but you shouldn't be concerned about going to them, whether you're getting the Philly stacks or not. They're going to look good. Real Muto, again, looks good at catcher. Rojas and Merrifield give you potential value. These are guys that probably or maybe look a little bit worse by the time we get to lock. You get confirmed lineups, you get value elsewhere, but they are cheap. They are in a good spot. Again, Schwarber and Harper are going to look good. Sosa's cheap. So this game offensively looks pretty good. And then again, Taijuan Walker pulling ownership. Sean V said, imagine playing chalk Taijuan Walker. I mean, the problem is it's a 5-game slate, and pitching on this slate isn't very good. Like, that's the reason that Walker is getting ownership, and that's the reason that he is showing up in 21% of the lineups that I built. Like, you can't just say, oh, don't play that pitcher when the whole slate is full of pitchers that I don't want to play. But the point that he's only getting ownership because it's a 5-game slate and he's cheap and he's one of the best of the bad pitchers. Targeting against pitchers like that is always really appealing, much more so than just saying, oh, well, this pitcher's popular, so I'm going to play hitters against him, even though he's really good. Here you're just getting, this guy wouldn't be rostered on most slates. He's only getting ownership today because of this specific slate. That does make those Mets bats against him look a little bit more appealing and feel a little bit better to get to. Yeah, no kidding, he's been bad, but everybody on this slate has been bad, Sean. Next, we have a game in Fenway, Tampa Bay taking on the Red Sox. We have Zach Little on the mound for Tampa Bay, Cooper Criswell going for the Red Sox. Little pulling about 15% ownership here, warranted $8,400 price tag. Showed up in about 16% of the lineups that I built. 24% strikeout percentage, not walking a lot of guys this year. 3.2 xFIP. His workload's been up and down, but a lot of it's also been performance related, like games where he struggles, they have a pretty quick hook. We've seen him throw as many as 107 pitches in a game this year, so I don't think we need to actually be too concerned about the workload outside of it's Tampa Bay. They do tend to pull their pitchers relatively quickly, but the strikeouts are there. The problem is that it's a good hitter's park, and the Red Sox are an above-average offense, but they do also have a top 10 strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year, so getting to Little as a mid-range option on this slate is perfectly fine. He's another guy that generally you're not playing that much of on full slates, but today he's one of the more talented pitchers on this slate, and overall it's a good enough spot. Criswell on the other side, pulling 5% ownership, showed up in 6% of my lineups. I don't really see any reason that we'd be prioritizing him. He has struck out about 25% of hitters this year, 3.2 xFIP. He's been good, but you do have some workload concerns with him. Tampa Bay, again, an above-average offense, tough park to pitch in. If you want to use Criswell just to be different, then fine. But, you know, like, I think he's somebody that probably, compared to like Taijuan Walker, is not getting enough ownership. But overall, I would rather probably just be finding other pitchers to get to. Offensively, Tampa Bay is showing up a lot as far as all stack types go. The Red Sox are closer to the bottom. In 5-man, Tampa Bay is actually coming in at the top. And you do get a nice, even though it's not a good matchup against Criswell, You do get a nice park upgrade for Tampa. You get very, very reasonable pricing. Talked about it with Josh Lowe yesterday. Only $4,200. This is somebody that in about 500 plate appearances last year had a 130 WRC plus. He projects around a 120 WRC plus going forward. He's just too good of a hitter for this salary. So he's getting a bunch of ownership and it's warranted. Caballero at shortstop, 4,100. Not the best price, not the best spot in the batting order, most likely, but on a 5-gamer where you are missing most of your stud shortstops, he looks decent. Arozarena, Paredes, both Diaz, all at very reasonable prices, especially Arozarena and Yandy Diaz in a park that plays up right-handed power. So even though the matchup with Criswell isn't very good, I do just like the park upgrade and the salaries that are available on Tampa Bay. On the other side, you do get to go up against a 15% owned Little. Rafael Devers is going to look like your best option. $4,900 is just a good price to get to him, even though Fenway Park isn't as good for left-handed home runs as right-handed home runs. So far this season, Little's been good against both sides of the plate. Sub 300 expected WOBA against both lefties and righties. 113 expected ISO to lefties, 110 to righties. So this is not a pitcher that you're looking at and saying, oh, you can really target him with lefties or with righties. It's more so if you're going to the Red Sox, you're going to just want the best, the most talented Red Sox hitters you can get, regardless of splits. So Devers is going to look the best. Connor Wong is cheap at catcher, so he'll be a decent value option. Dom Smith, not an exciting bat to get to, but he has $2,300 at first base, so there's some value there. But overall, Tampa stacks looking a bit better than Boston stacks do. Next, we have the Pirates taking on the Cubs in Chicago. Justin Steele going for the Cubs. Jared Jones on the mound for the Pirates. Jared Jones has been an absolute monster this year, and as a result, the salary is up to $9,100. 30.9% strikeout percentage, 2.7 xFIP. He has allowed 1.5 home runs per 9 innings. That's really been the only flaw that he's had. He doesn't walk guys, only a 3.9% walk percentage. He's been really, really good overall this year. And the expected power numbers for him aren't terrible. 163 expected ISO to lefties, 171 to righties. So he has run a little bit bad there. Lefties have a 225 actual ISO. So probably someone, you see this a lot with strikeout pitchers. When hitters make contact, a lot of times it's quality contact, because when guys have stuff as good as Jared Jones, if he doesn't make a mistake, you just don't make contact. So the vast majority of the pitches that you are going to make contact with are mistakes, and you can hit them hard. That's why a lot of times you will see pitchers that have really good strikeout stuff give up more home runs than you would expect for an elite pitcher. It's because when they don't make a mistake, you just don't hit it. So I would expect that Jones' home runs per 9 comes down, but he probably, does end up giving up more than a home run per 9 innings. But he's going to look good here. Projected for 30% ownership. Showed up in about 24% of the lineups I built. There's still a pretty good chance that the industry is under projecting him as well. If you look at his stuff this season, the 30.9% strikeout percentage, as I mentioned, 135.3 stuff plus. Like, he's just carrying this stuff plus number. And I don't have it in this sheet, and I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but Saris had posted it a couple of weeks ago. The minor league stuff plus number for Jared Jones was like 102 or 104. So it's not like Jared Jones is carrying the same stuff into the majors this year that he was throwing in the minors. So your projection models, your projection systems, they're going to continue to learn from what he is doing in the major leagues, but they're still very heavily influenced by what he did in the minors. And his stuff is just grading out so much better this season than it did in the minor leagues. So there is a pretty good chance that he is being under projected in most industry models. I think that's something to keep in mind. I'm not a big proponent of manually bumping projections, because I don't know exactly how to quantify it. You never know, especially if you're not using your own projections, you never know exactly what is or isn't accounted for. But I think it's pretty safe to say that most industry projections are not projecting Jared Jones to have the level of stuff that he has shown so far this season. And then on top of that, not only is the stuff elite, we're getting far enough into the season where K minus BB percentage becomes predictive. And he has a 27.1 K minus BB percentage. Like I said, 30.9% K percentage, 3.9% walk percentage. Strikeout percentage itself stabilizes pretty quickly. So him just maintaining this strikeout percentage, this K minus BB percentage, on top of showing stuff that is just so much better than it was in the minor leagues, if you are going to just manually bump projections, Jared Jones is the guy that I would do it with. He is actually right now in the strikeout prop model that is available through my Dub Club packages. He's the only guy that I manually bump his strikeout props over over industry projections, because it's very unlikely that he's being projected to be as good for his stuff to be as good as it is. So even without any sort of manual bump on the stuff that I ran, still showing up 24% of the time. I might end up even higher than that by lock. The strikeout stuff is excellent. And again, we also just don't have very good pitching on this slate. You have Tyler Glasnow, who has a higher strikeout percentage. We'll get to him. He's going to get a ton of ownership, and it's warranted. But he is $1,300 more expensive than Jones. And then outside of that, you don't really have anything. Like when you look at all pitchers going today, you have Joe Ryan and Clark Schmidt as the next two guys in strikeout percentage. They're facing each other in a game that starts before this slate does. So you get a huge, huge drop-off from Glasnow and Jones. Like Joey Estes has made one start, so I'm not counting him. You get to Cooper Criswell and Zach Little at 24 to 25% K percentages once you drop from Glasnow to Jones. So Jones looks really good. Strikeout upside looks great. Justin Steele on the other side, pulling about 27% ownership, showed up in about 27% of the lineups that I built. This is another example of you kind of just have to take what the slate gives you. Like Justin Steele hasn't been very good in his first three starts since returning from injury this year. He's only struck out 19.6% of hitters, 4.05 xFIP, 2 home runs per 9. He hasn't thrown more than 74 pitches in a start. Now, I don't want to read too much into that. I do think that the Cubs are being cautious with him. I do think he's been limited. You saw like 67 and 68 pitches in his first two starts. Last start where he threw 74, he only went 4 innings. He did give up 6 earned runs. So I do think that there is a pretty good chance that he was going to be allowed to go a little bit deeper into that game if he had been effective. But because he wasn't, they took him out where they did. I think expecting mid-80s in pitches from him today is very reasonable. And on this slate at 7,500 in a decent matchup with the Pirates, that is enough to just make him look like a good SP2. But it is important to keep in mind, especially going back to everything I was just saying about Jared Jones and indirectly about Tyler Glasnow. When you think about the top end range of outcomes for pitchers on this slate, assuming that Justin Steele does have some sort of limit, and even if he's pitching well, he's not going to give you 7 innings and 100 pitches, he can be a good value, but there's a real chance that Jared Jones and Tyler Glasnow just destroy every pitcher on this slate. And that can be difficult to make up because, if cheap bats do well, it doesn't really matter that you got 2 expensive bats. So it is important, I think, to keep in mind that Steele probably doesn't have that right tail to his fantasy point distribution, but he does project as a good value here, assuming that he is going to be able to throw somewhere in that like 80 to 85 pitch range. Offensively, neither of these offenses are going to look very good. Pittsburgh and the Cubs both showing up in the bottom half as far as all stack types go. 5-mans. You have Pittsburgh actually showing up 4th, which I think is interesting since Steele is getting ownership. The Cubs are lower, which isn't surprising given how good Jared Jones is. But I think the Pirates are very, very similar to the Mets here. I think that Steele is a better pitcher than Walker when healthy, for sure. Like, that's not even a question. Right now, we don't know exactly where he is as far as, I assume he's healthy because he's back pitching. But as far as rust and all of that goes, we don't know exactly where he is. But you're still getting the Pirates facing a pitcher that is more popular today than he probably would be on a normal slate. Like if you just throw $7,300 Justin Steele against the Pirates onto like a 10-game slate, he's going to get some ownership because the price tag's nice, but he's not going to be some mega chalk play. It's really just a factor of circumstances on this slate. So getting to the Pirates as a game theory, negatively correlated stack, I think does make some sense, just like the Mets make sense against Taijuan Walker. So far in his 3 starts this year, 247 expected ISO to lefties, 177 to righties. If you go back to the start of last season, 174 to lefties, only 109 to righties. O'Neal Cruz at 4,600 looks like a pretty good shortstop play. Again, we don't have the loaded shortstop position today that we normally do. We do have Ellie De La Cruz. We do have Mookie, but we don't have Gunnar Henderson. We don't have Seager. We don't have, there's another one, Bobby Witt Jr. So it's not quite as loaded as other days. Makes O'Neal Cruz a little bit easier. If you are going to look to bats against Jared Jones, it's like I was saying with the Red Sox, just go to the best ones. Cody Bellinger is the most likely guy to hit a home run, so play him. If you're going there, Suzuki, Morel both look fine. Mastroboni right now, you can see showing up the most. That's just a value placeholder. He's 2,100 with MPE. So right now, when you build lineups, he just gets thrown in there like, oh, well, we can throw this guy in with some good pitching, good bats. You'll probably just have other value open up once confirmed lineups come out, where Mastroboni's not going to be any sort of priority play. For the Pirates, I mentioned Cruz. I think McCutchen looks fine. Triolo is cheap with MPE if you need value. Brian Reynolds looks fine. But I do think O'Neal Cruz is actually my favorite play from the Pirates. Next, we have Oakland taking on the Astros in Houston. Houston disappointed last night against Aaron Brooks. It is wild how frequently the guys that you can't figure out how they're in the major leagues end up being good and killing a chalk offense. But today, we get Christian Javier taking on Joey Estes. Javier pulling 27% ownership. 24% of the lineups that I built before the show have Javier. So another guy where he hasn't been great this year, but because of this slate, I don't really care. He's only struck out 16.7% of hitters this year. He has a 14% walk percentage, 5.87 xFIP, 2.8 K minus BB percentage. The guy has been downright awful. Like, this isn't even, he's not been very good. His strikeout percentage is down about 12 points from previous seasons. The thing that stands out here, though, his fastball velocity is down about a mile per hour. He has a better stuff plus grade this year than he's had in the past. So I don't really know what to make of this, other than it's much more likely than not that Javier's strikeout percentage increases going forward. Because for one, even if you just ignore the quality of his stuff, it would be really, really weird for somebody that's had the strikeout stuff that Javier has to just completely fall off to where he strikes guys out at the same rate as Jose Quintana. So you just expect it to increase anyway. But then you also see that the stuff has been above average. It's probably been more a command and control thing, which, hopefully gets straightened out sooner than later. Like, if your stuff is really good, but you're always working behind in counts and you can't put anything in the strike zone, you're still not going to strike guys out. And you see that in the elevated walk rate too. So it's a scary spot to get to him because of how bad he has been, but you do get a good strikeout matchup against Oakland. This team does have power, but they do strike out a lot. Against right-handed pitching this year, they're fourth in strikeout percentage. They also have a 117 WRC plus. So again, it's not a safe spot, but getting to Javier at this price makes sense. On the other side for Joey Estes, really difficult to justify that 7K price tag. He doesn't project as a good strikeout pitcher, about a 17.5% projected strikeout percentage from most projection models, around a 4.5 FIP. And on top of that, he gets a really, really tough matchup against Houston. I would rather go to Criswell at 6,800. I'd rather probably go to Quintana or Walker at cheaper price tags. Walker, you can at least make the ownership case, but it's really, really tough, I think, to make a case for Estes. Javier, again, I'm sure I'll get to him because of the strikeout upside, but he has been downright awful. And you can certainly justify going to the A's the same way you can go to the Pirates, the same way you can go to the Mets. Javier has been worse, really, than any of the pitchers those guys are facing this year. Oakland has a bunch of power. So far this season, a 200 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Javier, 202 to righties. If you go back to last year, 27.5% K percentage to righties, but he still allowed a 245 expected ISO. Even when Christian Javier is on, he gives up power, and the A's have plenty of it. Shea Langeliers at catcher at 3,900, Lede at 3,700, Soderstrom, catcher first base, 2,500. I really like Brent Rooker as a home run play at 4,500. A ton of power there against the guy that gives it up. So the A's in the lineups I built, third highest stack percentage overall. They are middle of the pack in 2-mans. They're showing up a lot in 3-mans, which I think is a really good approach. You get that negative correlation with Javier. You use them as value. You can mix them in with a higher, not necessarily higher upside, but more likely to succeed offense, higher probability offense. But you're still getting that negative correlation. They drop off a little bit with 4-mans. They're still third in 5-mans. So overall, I do like getting to Oakland today against Javier. Houston, of course, is going to look great. Estes, like I said, doesn't project to be a very good pitcher. Houston has a ton of above average hitters in their lineup. All stack types, Houston's showing up the most. 5-mans, they're showing up second. 4-mans, they're showing up second. So the Astros clearly are going to look good. I would expect them to get a lot of ownership. 25% projected ownership coming into Alvarez right now. 16, 17% to Altuve, 20% to Bregman. They're going to be popular. They should be popular. But again, on a 5-game slate, it can be a little bit more difficult to differentiate if you do go to, say, a 5-man Houston stack. If you have 5 guys that are 15, 20% owned, it can be difficult to do something that really differentiates you, because even the quote-unquote low-owned offenses are going to have decent raw ownership compared to, larger slates where it's really easy to find some 2 and 3% owned mini stacks. So you do want to make sure you're paying attention to the Houston ownership, but they do look really good in this spot. And then finally, wrapping things up with Cincinnati and the Dodgers, we get the clear, far and away, without a doubt, top pitcher on the slate in Tyler Glasnow, $10,400, projected for 60% ownership, showed up in 62% of the lineups that I built. I have no idea how to make a case for not playing Tyler Glasnow outside of, again, the game theory component of it's baseball. He's 60% owned. Maybe he'll suck or get hurt or something, which obviously you're not rooting for. But there's no baseball or skill or matchup argument for not playing Tyler Glasnow on a 5-game slate where most of the pitching sucks. He has the best strikeout percentage on the slate at 33.6%, second best K-BB percentage to Jared Jones at 26.7%, best xFIP at 2.4%. And by the way, the Reds have the second highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching at 26.7% this season, only a 91 WRC plus on their active roster. Tyler Glasnow looks amazing. Nick Martinez, I don't really have any case to make for getting to him. 7,600, hasn't thrown more than 50 pitches in an outing since April. He's likely to be the bulk reliever here. It's just too expensive. And then you also factor in that he's facing the Dodgers. So best pitcher on the slate and probably worst pitcher on the slate from a DFS standpoint in Martinez. Offensively, it was really interesting to look at how the Dodgers are showing up, but it makes sense because of their pricing. They are showing up least often for 5-man stacks in the lineups that I built, but they're showing up third most for 4-mans, most for 3-mans, most for 2-mans. So that tells me that you want to be getting to the Dodgers here. They have one of the highest implied run totals. They have tons and tons and tons of talent, but it's hard to 5-man stack them. They fit nicely with some other stacks, though, as secondary stacks, 2-mans and 3-mans. Will Smith at catcher looks really good at 5,200. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani looks great whenever you can get there. I mentioned it a minute ago, but shortstop nowhere near as loaded on this slate. Mookie's going to look good at 6,200. You have De La Cruz, but he's facing Tyler Glasnow. So Mookie's going to look good. If Kike's in the lineup at 3K, he looks interesting. I don't know if he will be. It's a tricky spot because Brent Suter's the projected opener, and he's left-handed. And then you have Nick Martinez probably coming in as a righty. So I don't know that Kike will actually be in this lineup. If you expect Brent Suter to go 1 inning, you should just have a left-handed hitter batting 7th instead of Kike. So we'll see what the lineup is here. There is pinch hit risk too if he starts. Elly De La Cruz is interesting as a one-off, not only because of how good he is overall, obviously just gives you a ton of upside against a chalk pitcher, but he steals bases. Tyler Glasnow has never been good at holding runners. I haven't actually checked to see if that's changed too much, but the guy is 6'8". It's really, really, really hard to control the running game if you are that tall. You just really can't be that quick to the plate. So he's been better, looking at RSB. He used to be well below average. Now over the last 3 seasons, he's been average, way below average, and average. But either way, he's not going to be good at holding runners, and he has historically struggled with it. So De La Cruz, if he just finds a way to get on base, has tons of stolen base upside, more so than usual. But overall, outside of that, you're looking at the Dodgers. If you're going to Cincy, it's purely because of Tyler Glasnow's ownership. It's a good park to hit in. He's 60% owned. Weird stuff happens. We just saw the Rockies light up Michael King. Now, Michael King is nowhere near as good as Tyler Glasnow, but you don't have to go very far back in recent slates to see where the no doubt about it chalk pitcher got lit up by a really, really bad opponent. The Reds aren't as bad as the Rockies, but Tyler Glasnow is also a hell of a lot better than Michael King. So that wraps up the game-by-game breakdown here. Looking at the top pitchers for the slate, Glasnow by an absolute landslide. Jared Jones is the very clear second-best pitcher talent-wise. And then you just get a bunch of stuff that is pretty cheap. Justin Steele's showing up. He's probably somewhat limited, but I do expect 80 to 85 pitches. Christian Javier has been unbelievably bad this year, but You know, he said he's historically got good strikeout stuff, so he's getting some ownership. There's nothing on this slate that I have confidence in outside of Tyler Glasnow and Jared Jones. Other than that, it's just kind of spreading out exposure to Steele, Javier, Walker, Zach Little. I do think Quintana is going under owned, just given the huge question marks I have with every other pitcher that is getting ownership and more expensive than him. I think you could just save some money and go to Quintana. But the problem is, like, what are you getting with your savings? It doesn't necessarily matter. Like, you can get a lot of the same bats even by not going to Quintana. But I do like the lack of ownership there. I would say that he's my favorite contrarian pitcher. Only 6% owned, showed up 13% for me. So will be interesting to see if that ownership number just comes up a little bit. Like, if he gets to 13%, then you're just, I don't really have a preference between all of these not very good pitchers. I mentioned it before. Jared Jones is someone that I might end up a little bit higher on in the later in the day, just because I do think the industry is under projecting him. Not even like the industry is wrong in how they're doing it. I just think that he's kind of an outlier in how good he is compared to how good he was in the minors. Offensively, favorite hitters overall, you're looking at Yordan Alvarez. I really like the price tag on Josh Lowe, Altuve, Bregman, Astros bats in general, Will Smith at catcher, contrarian bats. Here you're just seeing some value placeholders show up. It's not like I love Caballero or Brett Harris or Triolo. I do really like Will Smith. I love Brent Rooker. He's my home run pick today as well. Mentioned it going through those games, but B Calicor in chat, what's up? But good home run spot for him, whether Javier gets it back or not. He just is going to look good. Stacking, the Astros look like the best overall stack. The Dodgers, especially in mini stacks, look really good. I like Oakland against Javier. You have a pitcher that's been unbelievably bad this year that is getting a bunch of ownership. So I like Oakland quite a bit. I like Tampa. I like the Mets in Philly, again, against a not very good pitcher in Walker that is getting ownership. Really sets up to me as a game theory slate where there's a couple clear-cut offenses in really good spots that everybody's going to want to play. I would rather, in large field tournaments especially, be stacking against the really bad pitchers that people are going to play to get to them. So that's today's 5-game slate. If you are a Dub Club subscriber, I'll have my game-by-game notes up later, and I'll be around in Discord throughout the day to talk about the slate, answer any questions you have. If you're looking to get access to that, use the link in the description below. Get 20% off. Also, remember to comment or tweet at me with any specific video series, video content you want to see from me at the new Endgame Syndicate site. Happy to put that stuff together, looking for ideas there. Other than that, good luck on your lineups tonight. Thanks for checking out the video.